Welcome to Harvest Time Bible Institute of Oklahoma. My name is Lori Scroggins, and I'll be your facilitator. Today, we're going to be talking about Abraham. We're in the book of Genesis, and we're going to start with chapter 20 and go through chapter 25. Since we got so much material to cover, I'm just going to dive right in. Okay, in chapter 20, Abraham journeys to a place and he meets the king Abimelech. Abimelech inquires as to who Sarah is, and Abraham tells him that Sarah is his sister. And so the king takes Sarah as part of his inventory, and during the night, he has a dream. God comes and visit King Abimelech and tells him that you have taken this man's wife, and that if he don't restore her back to Abraham, that he would kill him and all that's his. So the next morning, the king gathers all his men, tell them about the dream and tell them what happened, and basically he has to restore Sarah back to Abraham. And he asks Abraham, why did you do this to me? Why have you done this thing? You should not have done this. I did this with integrity. I thought she really was your sister. You didn't tell me she was your wife. And he said, well, I didn't know y'all feared God in this place. So to protect my life, I asked Sarah, wherever we go, just tell them you're my sister. That way they won't kill me and take her. So the Lord had Abraham to pray for the king. And the king and the Lord healed the king and all of the people, for he had closed the womb. In other words, no one could get pregnant whilst they were there because God had shut up their womb. So the Lord restored them through the prayer of Abraham and did not kill the people. Okay, now chapter 21 is talking about the birth of Isaac. And as we talked about in previous chapters, Isaac was the promised child. It was the promise to come, and told Sarah and Abraham that they would have a son, and so in chapter 21, it's more or less the promise being fulfilled. Isaac is born. And Sarah was like 97 when Isaac was born. So they didn't think they was going to have a child. And the name Isaac means laughter, because when he came, he brought just joy to their life. He was just joy for them. So in chapter 21, the first part of the chapter from verses 1 through 8, they're celebrating Isaac being weaned from his mother. So they have a big celebration for him. And during the celebration, Ishmael, Abraham's son that he had with the Egyptian woman, he's mocking him. And it's kind of like, he's mocking the blessing, the miracle child. So Sarah was very wroth with Hagar because of this. And she goes to Abraham and tell him to send this woman away. But Abraham, that's his son. So he, being a man of responsibility, being a responsible man, he wants to take care of his son and don't want to send him away necessarily. It's not until the Lord tell him to hearken or to listen to your wife. Listen to Sarah. Do what she says do. Send this woman away, because the promise is going to come through Isaac, not through Ishmael. Ishmael was conceived out of the flesh. He represents the natural man. Isaac represents the spiritual man, Anyway, so that's exactly what Abraham does. He gives Hagar a flask of water and saddles her up and send her and her son away out of the camp. Well, as time goes on, the water runs out. She thinks the boy's going to die, and she sets him off to the side while she goes off, because she don't want to watch her son die. And that's a very painful thing for a mother to do, to go through, to see her son die. But she don't want to do that. She don't want to watch him die. But the Lord had to open her eyes and let her know there's a well right there. And he also let her know that he's going to bless Hagar and going to bless Ishmael. And Ishmael's going to become a nation, because he is the seed of Abraham. And Abraham is the father of many nations, So the promise is going to be through Isaac, but he's also going to bless Ishmael because of that. All right, and Ishmael grows up, ends up taking an Egyptian woman for wife, and he's just fine, So that I really like the fact that Moses, when he wrote this book, he includes that story all the way to the time where Ishmael grows up and takes a wife. I appreciate that. Okay, now we're moving on to chapter 22. In chapter 22, God puts Abraham to a test. He gives him a test. And the test is, he wants him to take his son, his only son, that he loves so much, the one that he's been waiting for, the promised son. He wants to take him and offer him up as a sacrifice. He wants Abraham to kill his son, more or less. Well, Abraham believes God so thoroughly that he believes that if he kills the son, that God will raise him back up again. Because he knows the promise is coming through the son, so he feel like, what God could do whatever. So next morning, he gathers his son, a couple of servants, take him to the mountain that God told him where to go, and he's starting to prepare the sacrifice, prepare Isaac for sacrifice. But in the middle of the when he's getting ready to slay the child, the Lord tell him to stay his hand, don't kill him, because now that I see that you would not even withhold your son from me. Now, one reason why God did this is because he wants to show you what he's done for us. God didn't stay his hand. He killed his son for us. Jesus was like a lamb for the slaughter. Jesus was God's only son. Just like Isaac was Abraham's son, but Jesus was the Son of God. And the Son of God, God offered his son so we could have a relationship with him. And that's how important we are to God. He'll give his best for us, and Jesus was by far his best. And he sacrificed his son that we could have a right to life, so we could have eternal life with Christ. Because you got to have the blood applied to your life so that God can accept you and have a relationship and fellowship with you. So this is to demonstrate what God did for us. He kind of did it in the natural, and at that time, he didn't tell Abraham what he was doing. He just wanted Abraham to be obedient, and Abraham passed the test with flying colors. So that's what the first part of the chapter is talking about. And the last part of the chapter starts talking about the Abraham's brother, Nabal, and it tells about all the children that he's had, and so he kind of gets a telegram, if you want to call it that, where he's getting word from home about his nieces and nephews that was born unto his brother, and that's what the final part, talking about his relatives. Okay, now in chapter 23, Abraham is going to buy a burial plot for his wife. Sarah dies, and she dies at the age, let's see, how old was Sarah when she died? I think 127 when she died. And so he has to buy a burial plot for her. But he doesn't, even though he goes to the sons of Heth, and he tell them that, he need a place to bury his dead. But he don't want to. I'm just going to show you the business. This is talking about a business transaction he did. In the business transaction, he didn't want to just buy the cave, because they offered him just the cave. But he didn't want just the cave, and he refused the cave. He wanted the cave and the field and all the trees and everything in the whole field. So they told him, okay, if you want the field and the trees and everything that's in the field, and the cave too. That's going to be 400 shekels of silver. And he didn't dispute it. He agreed to it, and that became the burial plot for him and his family. And a few years later, in the next few chapters, you'll see when he died, that's where they buried him. So it became a burial plot for them. He bought the whole field. And that's what chapter 23 is talking about. Okay, now in chapter 24, he's going to take a wife. He's going to get a wife for his son Isaac. He talks to his head servant and asks his head servant to go back to his homeland and go back there and out of his father's house get a woman, get a wife for his son Isaac. And he makes him swear with a covenant. And through the covenant, this is what they used to do, is put their hand on the back of the thigh and made him swear that he would do this. And he said, but wonder if the woman don't want to come back with me. He said, but then you'll be released. But he wanted him to at least go try. So he gathered up 10 camels and gave him some jewelry like bracelets, earrings, and stuff like that, and sent him off to go back to his homeland. And the servant, trying to fulfill his obligation, asked the Lord. He just go to the Lord and said, Lord, whoever is the one that I'm supposed to choose, who's the one that you want to become with me, let her come out here by the well and pull water, draw water for not only me, but for me and my camel. And while he was yet praying, here comes Rebecca. Rebecca comes and she offers him water and said, I'll get some water for all your camels. And she fills up the water. The one that he asked and the sign that he asked for, she fulfills it to the T. Then he tells her who he is and want to know if she can go to his father's house, that he may lodge there or whatever. And he gives her the earrings and give her a couple of bracelets and let her know he's a man of wealth, And so she runs home and tells her family about him and told them what all happened. And they come out to meet him and take him back to the house. And he just tell them, they fix him a meal. But he said, before I eat, in other words, before I take anything from y'all, let me tell you why I'm here. And he tells them that I'm here to find a wife for my master's son. And, Abraham, they knew Abraham when he told them who he was, and told him that he wanted to take her back with him for the son. And in the long run, they agreed, but they said, well, just let her stay here for about 10 more days. You don't have to rush off. You don't have to leave right away, And they said, well, let's ask Rebecca what she want to do. And they asked Rebecca, and she said, I will go with him. So without hesitation, they packed up and left the next available opportunity. And then when they get there, Isaac is in the field. He could see the camels coming. He runs out to the field and asks, he could see him coming. And Rebecca asked, who's this guy that's coming? They said, that's my master. That's Abraham. That's Isaac. And so she covers herself with the veil, I love that because she's coy and she's using her womanly wiles, being coy and all. And it's just really a precious story. I love the story. And so he meets Rebecca and he falls in love with her, and he takes Rebecca to the tent where his mother used to live, in his mother's tent. And they marry, and it's a beautiful love story. It really is. You just got to kind of imagine what it must have been like for them, Okay, so now we're going to go to the final chapter, which is talking about Abraham. Abraham takes another wife. And she gives him several sons. And this is one way of God was making him father of many nations, So she bared him several different sons. And in chapter 2, it tells you the name of the sons. Verses 2 and 3 of chapter 25. It tells you the names of the sons that she bare for Abraham. And then in verses 7 through 11, it talks about the death and burial of Abraham. And like I told you earlier, the place that he purchased for Sarah, that's where he was buried as well. And then in chapter 25, verse 12 through 18, it tells you about the descendants of Ishmael. And then in chapter 25, verses 19 on, it tells you about the children of Rebekah. Now, Rebekah had the same problem that Sarah did. She couldn't have children. So after about 20 years, Isaac went to God on Rebekah's behalf and asked God if he would open her womb. And he did. But she was pregnant with twins. She was pregnant with Esau and Jacob. And she had to ask the Lord, Lord, why am I thus? What's wrong? Because her pregnancy was a rocky one. You know, she's like, Lord, why am I thus? Why am I like this? And he told her, there's two nations in your room, and they're wrestling against each other. And so when the children were born, when the twins were born, Esau came out first. And Jacob had a hold of his heel. He was coming out holding on to his brother's heel. And Isaac favored Esau, but Rebekah favored Jacob. And to make the long story short, since Esau was born first, he was born with the birthright. And what the birthright means is if anything was to happen to the father of the family, you would become the head of the family. That was your birthright. You was born into that. And your responsibility for the birthright is concerned is you are responsible to take care of your mother for the rest of her life, and you were responsible to take care of your sisters until they married, until their husbands took care of them. But you also had benefits with the birthright. The birthright, you also got a double portion of whatever the rest of the siblings got. Let's say, for instance, you had, in this case, it was two of them. There was Jacob and Esau. If they ever had property that had to be divided up, Esau would have got 2/3 of the property because he would have got the double portion. But Jacob would have only got 1/3 of it. So, you had his responsibilities and rewards, for having the birthright. But Jacob had a problem with it because they were twins. They were born on the same day. He can't help it that he came out second. He had no control over that. But he envied his brother's birthright and always wanted it. Esau could take it or leave. He didn't care. He despised his birthright. He didn't care about all that. So once he went hunting and was very hungry, his brother said, I'll sell you a pot of stew for your birthright. And he took him up on it. And so that's how that became. Okay, so that's basically it, chapters 20 through 25. Next time we meet, we want to take up with chapters 26 through 30. Thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, you could email us at harvesttimeokc@gmail.com. Thank you, and hope to see you soon.